All right, listeners, welcome back. Thank you for tuning back in to the Fishing for Men podcast. If you have been following along with our series around identity, lucky you. We're here to wrap it up, and even more lucky for you, we've spent quite a bit of time between episodes 5 and 6 getting our audio down. So hopefully you enjoy this episode and you enjoy the sound quality you're lucky to hear right now. If you've been following along, we've been covering a lot of topics, our identity as sons of God, as husbands, providers. But remember that really what we really grasp to is that our primary identity is found in Christ. So joining today, we got a host of Sons of Christ here. I'm Spencer Clancy joining along, and I've got my good friends Billy,
Hey guys.
Cole,
Hey.
and Brandon.
Hey, everyone.
And today we're just really diving into the topic of our identity as friends. So, fellas, little trivia for you as we get this kicked off, and listeners, you can do a little play along as well. What percent of adults said they had zero close friends in 1990? What do you think? Price is Right rules.
Zero friends.
No Googling.
Well, I'll pick the mid mark, 50.
I was going to say around that. Yeah.
I'll play it
40 or
safe.
50.
Nobody would be on stage with Bob Barker right now. 3% of adults said that they had zero close friends
That's pretty
in
low.
1990. Very low. Compared to 12% in 2021.
Interesting.
Pretty wild. And 33% of adults had 10 or more close friends in 1990 compared to 13% in 2021. So that was 3 years ago. So it's safe to say, if you look at the trend, we're somewhere close today that only 10% of adults had 10 or more close friends. Just 10 or more is quite a bit.
I was going to say,
pretty
yeah,
wild.
that's a big
That's
number.
a lot of
Pretty
people.
good number. I don't know that, and especially in a big metroplex like where we are in Dallas, that can be quite a lot. I don't know that I could rattle off 10 close
I'd be
friends.
curious to see what people's definitions of close friend
Yeah.
is.
It's true. It's probably a sliding scale. So
Oh yeah,
I
for
was
sure.
about to say that. Yeah.
have you, those friends that, everybody has those friends that you just talk about. But, I think the point is no matter where we are, we all have this innate desire for friends. We hear a lot about, well, I'm an extrovert, I'm a lone ranger. And that's okay if that's your preference, but it's not really how we were designed. Humans by nature, we desire those relationships, and they're really critical to our walk with Jesus. And in fact, 61% of people say having friends is a key part of their life. And so it's important that we have this opportunity to chat through what does the Bible say about friendship? And we're really going to table this, pun intended, through the analogy of King Arthur's court and the king's table. So that idea of a circle, you may have heard it described as a board of directors, whatever you call them. It's really important that you take some time to evaluate your friendships in life. And so this is going to really help us better understand our friends. And so we want to just walk you through some criteria, and we'll have some discussions about their own friends and what we think. But what does the Bible say about what should our friendships look like? And lucky for us, we get to do this as friends. But I know, Billy, this is something that you've really been talking about. And so can you tell us a little bit about this idea of King's Table, and really what is that first point that comes from that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this kind of comes from a message that I heard several months back, but it's, think of, a big round table and the people that you allow to kind of sit at your table. And the analogy there is, who are the people in your life that you allow to influence you? Who are those people? Because at the same time, those people that are influencing you are going to be kind of the way that you start to act or emulate or taking advice from. And so I think the first thing that comes to mind is, one, are they moving you closer to Jesus, or are they pulling you farther from Jesus?
Yeah.
That's one of the things that comes to mind. We all go to the same church, and one of the things that our pastor says is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And so you think about that and or like, I can be a Jesus follower, but maybe I'm gonna still hang out with these people and they're my close friends. It really doesn't work. And I think we probably all have some examples of that in our life. But some of the things we want to examine today are just the story of David and the people that he had in his life, people that influenced him. And so the first one I want to talk about today is David and Jonathan. And I think this one is really interesting because the theme and really, I guess, the topic that I want to talk about is this idea of intimacy in a friendship. And so I'll ask you guys this question real quick, but like, what comes to mind when you think of intimacy?
My wife.
No, yeah, no.
It's like I'm not gonna be intimate with another dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like it kind of makes you like cringe and
Yeah,
a little
for sure. For sure.
But I think with a Western mindset, this idea of intimacy is often linked to a physical.
Yeah.
But there's also an emotional, even spiritual level of intimacy. We think about our intimacy with God. But we also think about sort of the emotional intimacy. And one of the things I was even just talking to Katie about and giving some advice to somebody else too was like, even in a marriage, your wife, and if for Katie, me, both of you are never going to fully meet the needs of each other. It's impossible. I will never meet every single need and desire that Katie has. I'm not capable of that. The only person capable of that is God and Jesus. He did that. And so we need these other people and men in our lives. And so one of the people that David had in his life was Jonathan. And you see this in 1 Samuel 20 and this just intimate relationship that they have. Anytime there's a struggle or something going on, they're like deeply, deeply aligned in talking about what's going on. They share feelings, they laugh, they cry together. Do you have friends in your life that you can cry with? Do you have friends in your life that you can tell those things that you've never told anybody? I've had those moments with y'all where I've laid stuff out that I hadn't told anybody ever. And so do you have friends like that that can see you for who you actually are, right? And for the good and for the bad. And so just through that story and this example of David and Jonathan, if you don't know, so Jonathan was the king's son, and he actually gave up his right to the throne for David, which is just fascinating to have somebody like that would even sacrifice like that. And so I just love this story and this idea of intimacy. And although it's kind of cringy, like for our Western minds, like I think it's a super critical piece to the people that you have in your life. And so for y'all, what have been your experiences with friends sort of beyond the surface level, like sports, work?
Yeah. I think just going through my whole life of friend groups, I can honestly probably say I've had one or two intimate relationships with obviously buddy relationships along the way. I'm glad I can say that actually, because thinking of the friend groups, I'm like, well, I'm glad I left that one. I'm glad I left that one. And I've said this to y'all in the past is I didn't even know at the time that God was working in me when I left those friend groups.
Mm-hmm.
I left a friend group before they started partying in high school. I left a friend group in college because they were doing the wrong things. I left a friend group that 8 months ago that was not putting me in the right direction. So, but I can honestly say that I've had intimate relationships at least with one or two, and now I'm happy to say that I have, the five of you that I do have deep relationships with. So that's a little bit about it.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about what you were touching on, Billy, about surrounding ourselves with this community, and why is that even important? Why can't it just be me with God or me with my spouse? And you hit on an important point that no one individual can fulfill that need aside from God. I kind of think of it like, it says in Genesis that we're created in God's image, right? But none of us fully reflect who God is. We reflect a piece of him. And I'm similar to Cole in some ways. We like things neat and tidy, but I'm also very different from him. And same as, I look around the room at each one of you guys. And so it's like, by having that community and people around me, I see a different piece of Christ reflected in each one of you. And I learned something about that I don't have on my own. And so I think that's one of the real important reasons why it's good to have a group of Christ-centered people around you.
Yeah,
I would absolutely agree. I think in high school, I kind of viewed myself sort of as a chameleon. Like I played football, but I also loved video games, and those were two groups that didn't always just vibe together. So I had to be who I needed to be in front of that group.
Sure.
So it was all surface level because I was playing to who they wanted to be. And it wasn't until college that I met some friends where it's that super cliche, but I could just be yourself and
Yeah.
you felt comfortable being vulnerable with them. And that was just like why I look back and there's nobody from high school that I keep up with regularly. But there are people that I talk to and I text every single day from college, all because of that comfortable being and just opening it up. But I would say the one thing that I have had been lacking up until I met this group was a group that I felt comfortable talking about faith with. Because part of
Yeah.
that chameleon of I'm not going to push you because if you're not comfortable with it, I won't go there. But
Yeah.
until I've met this group of guys where it's like, oh, I've never been able to actually talk about these things and it'd be okay. And like people are like, yes, absolutely. So it's been interesting to see the progression and comfort level just in going deeper from me. Sometimes we look for other people, but I've had to develop that comfort to even like open up about it with you guys because I've just never had it. And that's been an
Yeah.
interesting experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Me and Katie, obviously we went to college together, and we had a lot of the same friends then. Growing up, there's only one person that I've kept up with from any kind of schooling since college, and the one friend that I have kept up with, it's hard for us to have get connected. He's got 3 girls soon. It's hard for us to sometimes like get connected together because he lives over an hour away. But shout out to Camden, who has been sort of my best friend ever since I was 5. And we have been able to have that relationship. Like, I called his mom. He called my parents mom and dad. We call each other brothers, and we like truly told people we were brothers. And like, you don't even look the same. Like, who cares? We're brothers. And so like, he's the only one that I ever kind of had that level with. And then whenever me and Katie sort of got back into going to church and making that a real priority in our life, we went 2 years with no friends at all. And so I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed, and I got the 5 of you guys, which is fantastic. And I look back on that. What's really funny is whenever I was wanting to have friends, and like Katie would get a friend, and I'm like, does she have a boyfriend? Is she married? But then I would be like, does he like sports? Does he play golf?
Checklist.
At the time, does he like bourbon? Like
Yeah.
I had this checklist of things that I like wanted them to do, which is really funny because to some degree, we don't fit that category. Like some of us don't play golf. Some of us don't pay attention to sports. I don't even drink anymore. Like there's so much of those things don't matter.
Well, and that begs a good question, which I thought of when Spencer was sharing as well, is what beyond common interest, then
Sure.
what makes a good friend? Like, how did you, Spencer, and that group of people, what made you feel comfortable that you could open up?
Yeah, it's that I think it's that whole concept, and I know it's kind of big, but it's that psychological safety of like it's safe to share this with you, regardless of whether or not how you're going to react. I know that I can tell you my deepest, darkest secret, and you're not going to laugh at me. You're not going to judge me. You might rib me a little bit because as my buddy, but at the end of the day, I'm going to be just as good a friend with you 5 minutes from now after I tell you this is what I can tell you. I think that's one of those biggest things is when you look at the quality or the elements that are in that friendship, that's when you know if you can really categorize it as some of those deeper, more emotionally mature things like vulnerability and stuff. That's where I think you've got that's a good friendship.
So you got people who listen and
Yeah.
come alongside of you, and they're not
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there.
it's a
Yeah.
great way to put it. Yeah.
I looked around and I saw other guys who were being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing that stuck out to me. So, like, for instance, Brandon,
You're talking about
you were
the
the-
group then?
yeah,
Okay.
you were the first one for me that was super vulnerable about your story.
At that lunch? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember, there was one, Katie was doing something, and I was at home, and I think the kids were asleep. Like, we spent 2 hours kind of talking through your story and what that was about. And so that was a big thing for me of like, hey, if he's able to do that and share and be open about it, hey, I can do this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you created some of that. You have to have somebody in that group that's going to create that psychological safety too. Like it
Yeah.
can't just be a one-way street of one person. Like can't just be Brandon pouring out his
Yeah.
guts. We're all like, yeah, we're great.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
So-
such a good point about it being two-sided.
Yeah. So the second one we kind of want to touch through, still stuck on David's story and one of the other people that he has at his table, but this time it's his good buddy Nathan. And the thing about Nathan in 2 Samuel, I think it's 12, he's the guy who calls David out. And
Calls him out when he does what?
when he does the bad thing of adultery, and then also kills a man because of it and tries to hide it. Like he didn't just
pretty
like
bad.
he didn't just like lie to somebody, like although he did, but it wasn't just like a white lie that he threw.
He
on
didn't
the
just
like,
steal. He didn't
don't
just
do
steal
that.
Snickers.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Hey, don't take that extra coin from that peasant or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
he did some bad stuff, and
Yeah.
David did everything he tried to in his power to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a lot of power at the time. And he was like, I'm just going to tuck this behind and I'm not going to think about it. And Nathan's like, no. So he tells him the story and he's like, paints this picture of this man. And David's like, let's go get him. And Nathan's like, no, that man is you.
Ouch.
Like, do you have friends like that? Have you ever had friends like that? And when somebody does that, like, what is stir up inside? Do you feel comfortable, or how can you even like make that a more, say, comfortable, because it's always going to be uncomfortable, but like what have y'all's experience been, or have you ever had somebody
Oh, I mean, most recently it was for you and Mike calling me out when we were recording like a month ago.
I think we were
On-
recording this one.
We were
recording
trying
this
to
episode,
record this episode.
And it was
Second time
it was
for us
about my
audio.
profanity, and ever since then, because you guys called me out, I'm watching it more. So I thank you for that, and that's really I think that's the first time I've had a friend call me out on things that sticks out in my mind right now. I don't know about you guys.
I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I think the foundation you have to do that is what we were talking about earlier, that trust and knowing that they're coming from a place of
Yeah.
love and to build you up, rather than you did something to make them mad and that's just their reaction back to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My college buddies that I alluded to earlier, both of them have called me out on separate occasions, but one of them just really held up a mirror. That's kind of how I said it. He's just like, about a pretty toxic relationship I was in at the time. And he's like, what are you doing? And I wish I could tell you all that I was just like, thank you. But I was like the total, they say the 3 reactions when you get feedback like that are you either deny, defend, or deflect.
Yep.
I totally defended it, deflected it.
You had all three.
I just like all of the emotions at that time, question that friendship. But then you step back and it's like the next day, you're like, wow, how cool to have somebody that will actually call you to the carpet like that and really want, and you, to your point, they want what's best for you, and that's why they're saying it. But at the time, you think it's just some judgmental personal attack. I did, at least. So it's taken a lot for me to like practice the art of receiving feedback.
What about calling out people? Like I have this feeling of wanting to call out certain people, not in this group, but I have the fear of the 3, reflect, that I forget what you said, deflect,
Deny,
all those.
defend, deflect.
Yeah, I have the fear of that and what the response is going to be, but I just sometimes just want to get it off my chest.
Yeah.
So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
So in all honesty, whenever we did this last time and I was thinking about, put up air quotes, calling you guys out on certain things I was seeing, I actually thought about it probably for at least a month. Like it had been like, because I wanted to see, is this just one instance?
Oh, and see if it repeated
Is this
itself.
something that's happening? Do I say something? I almost went through this battle and argument of like, is this a big deal? Should I say something? What do I do? God, is this really like, should I do anything about this? But for whatever reason, I felt like after we had talked about this episode and like actually having people that would do that, I was like, all right, dude, I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah.
But I was like super nervous to do that the whole time. And so I think the reason why I did do it though is because we had the relationship that we had.
Yeah.
Like if there are people in your life that you're looking at calling out, like what standard are they living up to? Because are they living what we would consider the standard of following Jesus, or are they living to the standard of whatever the world says that standard is? Because if you try to call somebody out to live to the standard of Jesus that's not following Jesus, they're going to give you a big Heisman and say, what are you talking about? But if you have that trust and relationship and you spent the time building it up, to some degree, I think there's that almost that credit build up to be able to actually do that. But there has to be an established relationship first.
I 100% agree. And we've been talking about maybe when um, we've been doing something quote unquote wrong that needs to be stopped. But I think another way that someone can call you out is maybe more of like helping to lift you up, a friend. Um, I know in this group a couple of months ago, I was struggling with something and I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, you gave me credit for being vulnerable earlier, but that doesn't mean I'm still good at being vulnerable all the time. But because you guys were around me all the time and could kind of see that I was out of whack, um, Billy and Cole separately, when I was going through something, were like called me up. They're like, "What's going on? Something's not right here."
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so that's calling out in a different sense, but it's that same, it comes from that same place of having that quote unquote intimate relationship with people where they know what's going on in your life. They're there to point you back to God when you
Yeah.
get off track.
They can tell when there's a difference in your demeanor
Mhm.
and when to reach out.
Yeah. I think that's an important piece too, is like that's when you know you've got kingdom friends,
Mhm.
is what they're pulling you to, kind of to Billy's point at the start. It's just they're the ones that they're gonna pick you back up, but they're picking you back up to God's path, not like
Pointing you.
yeah. Like, hey,
in a
let's
good
get you up off the mat at and go pony up to a bar. Like, probably not. You know,
Right,
yeah,
right.
Let's go figure out a way to distract you
Yeah.
from this and get you over it.
But I've been in those friend
Oh,
groups, right? You know,
100%.
those aren't the
I've probably been that friend who's like, hey, let's just go get hammered and we'll
Yeah.
forget about it together.
Yeah,
vicious,
yeah.
the vicious cycle.
That's an old Billy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, very much. Very much so. But I mean, we've been there. I think we've all been in those situations.
I've
And
certainly
there's
been there for sure.
an unhealthy way to deal with it, and then there's
Mhm.
the healthy way that you can
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah, and I think it's good to try and hopefully there's some younger crowd listening to this and they can understand that stuff before they walk through it the way we did. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to point that out.
And I'd say too, like the last thing that I'd point out that's been really interesting to me about someone to call you out when you have to give that feedback. One of the things I love that Nathan did was he leaned in with curiosity. Granted, it was like he was asking questions to get to a point he knew, but I think that's one of the most important things that I see today in all facets of life, especially friendship, is that I'm not going to lean in and give you that feedback automatically making assumptions. I'm going to lean in first and tell you, this is what I'm seeing. What's going on? Like, that's what I feel like a good friend is going to do. It's going to give you the benefit of the doubt first, but call it out without throwing that judgment and that assertion at it.
That's such a good point.
Yes.
I
That is a
love
great
that.
point.
Because you can bring the hammer down on somebody and just
Yeah.
crumble them.
And not even understand what's going on with it. Yeah.
Well, and not just that, but that's exactly what God does. Like when Adam and Eve sin, he doesn't come into the garden rolling in going, "What did you do?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Where are you?" "Well, we were hiding because we're naked." How come you knew you were naked?
Yeah.
Look at
All
you, Spencer.
curiosity.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah.
I think that's a very
Yeah,
important
that's
point.
a fantastic. All right, so the last person that we want to talk about that's part of David's King's Table is his commander Joab, and this one's a little controversial because he goes off the rails towards the end of the book.
The Bible's
but
full of those kind of people.
but
It's good.
yeah, they kind of flip characters throughout the time. But one of the things that Joab does demonstrate for David is just this fearlessness and loyalty. Like he is like, whatever you need to do, I do it. Whatever it is, I don't care. So there's several different examples of this all throughout 2 Samuel and I think 12, 19, and 24. But I think this is an interesting one because I think we may have talked about this before, but this is kind of teeters on the line too of like you want that fearless and loyal person, but I think there can also be that sometimes you need somebody to also push back a little bit, not just like a yes man.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because
But once it's a yes,
But
He's
then,
all in.
yeah, like you kind of got to just be careful. I think on this one is what I want to say. But you just
Yeah.
want that person that's gonna be in your corner no matter what, and be able to help you through that. And so I just love that idea of somebody that's gonna go fight for you, no matter what the circumstances are. So, have you had friends like this? Maybe on sort of the not so great side, but also on the good side. I think we probably just described an example of that just a second ago. But like, what have your experiences been with sort of the loyal or fearless type of friend? Curious. One thing I want to do after we talk about all the reason I'll bring this back up is like, which role do you think each one of us plays? Kind of what
Oh, I like that question.
I think it'll be kind of cool. But we'll talk about loyal and fearless first.
So my loyal and fearless friend is my brother, who's actually younger than me. And examples would just be growing up in grade school and at the bus stops. He's actually the one that would raise fists at people that are picking on me. And I think that this is the first time as an adult I've ever admitted that I had my little brother stick up for me. But it's cool to say. And I know for a fact that he would still do it to this day. So that's actually physically that's my brother. I don't know anybody right now.
Sure.
I'm trying to think too. Honestly, I kept myself kind of protected and guarded and kept friends at a safe distance. So in that sense, I probably missed out on the opportunity to have those type of people in my life.
Yeah. I came from an Irish Catholic family, so I have two cousins that are like brothers to me,
Mhm.
and I know they would. My brother-in-law was my best man, and I know he'd be there. And it's not even just like, you know, on the physical sense, but if there was something I said that I need you to get to Texas, and not one of them lives in the Metroplex DFW, they'd come. My friends from college, but
That's a good
just
example.
about every single one, like
Yeah.
that stood next to me at my wedding. If I said I need you to be here, they'd be there. And that's that. I feel very lucky for that. So that's been kind of interesting, but I don't know that I could count on any of them to, like, if I said I wanted to do something that wasn't kingdom related, to be like, no,
Maybe we should
and,
go that.
and
Yeah,
that
yeah.
fearless to be like, I'm going to be show loyal to you and holding up that mirror and play that Nathan role. That's been an interesting one, because I do think that's another way that you can define loyalty is, you know, they'll save you from yourself and they won't leave you when you least deserve it, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah, mine definitely. Well, for one, Camden was always the one that even growing up, it was like, dude, I don't know what's going on. It's like, I'm coming to get you. Like, sweet. I don't know what it's for, but I don't feel good or whatever. This happened, probably girl problems or whatever. But he would always be like, I'm coming over now. A lot of my college buddies were like that. Now I was in a fraternity, so like you just sort of naturally have that bond of like, I'm gonna back them no matter what happens, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of them back me because of dumb things that I did. Pulled me out of situations that I probably could have got myself pretty harmed. But at the same time, I think there's also a lot of times where there's some unhealthiness of that too. Of like, hey, I'm going to pull you away from that. Let's go to the bar. Or I was that guy too. It's like, dude, I'm coming over, bring in a 30 pack, and we're just going to hang out, kind of thing, you know. So to some degree, I was that person too. But I mean, a lot of the fearless, loyal people that I had was those guys that I had because of the fraternity bond
Yeah.
that we had. So let's play the game of which role do you think some of
What remind me of what our three choices are? It was three, right?
Yep. So we've got sort of that intimacy, somebody
Intimate.
that you can talk about,
Call you out.
somebody that'll call you out, and then sort of that just loyal, fearless. I'm gonna run through a wall for you, kind of no matter what. And what I heard through this conversation, there's just almost like there's sort of like a linkage
There
sometimes
definitely
in
is.
between.
Yeah.
And we may play different roles at different times.
Yeah.
But is there one that's more predominant that you see in the group of six? I'm just kind of I'm curious.
Well, Mike's not here, but I see him as the call you out.
For
Yeah.
sure.
He's
Oh,
the
yeah.
call you out in our group.
He's definitely the more assertive. I think.
Yeah. Intimate. He's
I also see Mike though as the like loyal or fearless one.
Yeah.
Dude,
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. He's
definitely.
he's
I
there
don't
for
care.
everybody.
Yeah.
Whatever you
Yeah.
need, I'm coming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Brandon's pretty intimate.
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
put
it's
myself
me.
in the first category.
That's where I'd put Cody too.
Yep. I would agree with
Cody
that.
can go deep.
Yeah,
He's
Yeah.
like a fantastic listener.
he is.
Like he'll be like,
He is.
I'm gonna like think about what I'm gonna respond and then I'll respond. Where I'm like, nah, I'm just gonna let it out.
Yeah, right. No, I'd like to think I balance somewhere between that deep and intimate, but probably loyal and fearless. I struggle with the calling thing people out just because that's part of that my origin story of that chameleon. That's a hard one for me.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat as you. I think. Yeah, I'm not good at calling people out, but you need me to do something. And Debbie always gets upset when I'm the yes man. If you need mulch done, Billy,
loyal.
you guys
Yeah.
need anything done, I'm usually there. If I can be. So, and then intimacy, I mean I can share anything with you five.
Sure. I'd definitely see that with you.
Yeah. Billy, I'd say you're some of the first category as well.
Yeah.
The intimate one, yeah.
And call out since you called me out.
I'll think about it for a really long time. And then like, all right, we're gonna do it.
Maybe after this episode now you'll be better at it though.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think there's interesting because I would almost say, hopefully, if you find a friend group that loyal, but I think when you find a group of friends that you feel like are aligned spiritually, you could almost substitute the word loyal with grace. Like, and I think all of you, this
Yeah.
is a group that would definitely give a lot of grace because that's the model we're going back to, right? It's like who God was and Jesus was as
Yeah.
a friend. Like,
Yeah.
if nothing, they weren't grace filled, and that's what would kind of define their loyalty. And I would give every single one of you guys that too. So.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
So three big things to really consider and think through as listeners, as you start to weigh your friendships, and we kind of talk about some of our experiences. No doubt many of you have probably had something similar. But here's the challenge for us is to just, think about who do you have surrounding you right now? And do you like who you have sitting across the table from you? And also, do you like who your friends see when they see you across the table? Maybe you don't have those type of friends. Like you don't have the deep and intimate. You may not have the person that's going to hold up the mirror, or maybe somebody that's just loyal and fearless. So is it time to seek that community? And how are you? So maybe it does start with you. There's always that idea that it's like a ripple. You have to be somebody that's a good friend before you can have those great friendships. So when you have the right group of friends, though, surrounding you, when you are a good friend, that's where you're really going to see that love of God in demonstration, and you get to experience Him in a whole new way because He becomes central to all those relationships. So pray that we as men can really be the ones to start to turn the tide from that metric, that 13% that we talked about, so that we can seek out community, we can be vulnerable, we can be fearless and encouraging, and we can let people inside to be on, where that only 99% is known and still be completely known. So until next episode and next series, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next time.
Well, y'all, thanks for joining us on Fishing for Men. We know you could be spending your time doing anything else, yet you chose to spend it listening to us, and we are so thankful for that. We hope you found something valuable from this episode. If there are other topics you want us to discuss, we would love for you to reach out to us on Instagram at Fishing for Men Podcasts, or email us at fishingformenpodcasts@outlook.com. We pray that you come alongside us in the journey of discipleship to Jesus. So stay tuned for more episodes. The stories are still being written.